Welcome to this new edition of my photo presentations for the month of June 2022. Got a little bit late in the publications, but let's try to catch that up. So let's start. My first photos are from Marseille, a city in the south of France, one of the major cities of France. For that trip, I was willing to try a new lens, new for me, which I'm not used to use. The Wetzlar 50mm Heliar f3.5 lens, the new model. I used it on a Leica M8 with a CCD sensor. It's not a full frame sensor, but yeah, I kind of wanted to try it out and see if I could get used to this lens. I like the rendering of this old Leica, the first digital Leica. M format digital Leica. I like its color science. So here we have the Bay of Marseille. I was trying to render the feeling we have when we're there. So both photos, one is from outside, obviously, and the other one is from the inside of a saloon, looking at the same view, basically. When I travel, I also try a little bit of everything. I try to not only to have photos I like, but also to practice and try to tell stories and try to adapt myself to the equipment, find new ways of using it and feel more trained with it. So every lens on those manual lenses, every lens has a different feel for the focus, for the aperture. So it's nice to practice. And yeah, those two photos are from the room I was staying in. Here again, same equipment, Leica M8 and the Wetzlar 50mm Heliar f3.5. France has a fantastic network of high-speed trains. That's a detail on the left from the train station in Lyon when you go through France from north to south towards Marseille. And on the right, it's simply a detail. It gives a good idea also of the bokeh of this Wetzlar lens and the color rendering, quite old school. I really started to like it, even so it's not very open, not that shallow in terms of focusing. But yeah, very nice bokeh, very soft and smoothie. Again, two photos, one from the trip. This green, we have the rendering of the M8 CCD, often kind of like a Kodachrome rendering. That was a color science I believe Kodak and Leica had given to this Kodak sensor at the time. On the right, the Bay of Marseille. Again, same equipment. It's a bit like, when for painting, I see it a little bit like this. When you have new brushes, you have to try to get a feel of it and see how it moves the paint. So. Again, this Wetzlar, here I'm taking pictures through an artistic facade for the Museum of Civilizations of Europe and the Mediterranean, a museum called the MUSEM. Very interesting structure. And here it gives us a good idea of the color rendering and the resistance to high contrast of this lens. It's pretty... I kind of like the precision of the lens, but at the same time, this old school rendering, really, I think, interesting lens. It's got a weird shape too. It's interesting to look at per se. Here again, those two photos. One is of the port of Marseille on the left, and on the right you have this museum, the MUSEM, and those facades where I took the picture from before. So Marseille is very interesting in terms of architecture. If you like architecture photography, you'll find lots and lots of different ambiances and different constructions of all styles. Yeah, really interesting city. Very nice place. Again, when I try new equipment, most of the pictures I showed before were with really high lights. Sunny moments, but also I tried to do some street photography with it in Marseille, try to discover the city, try to discover places, new ambiances with lower lights or artificial lights, and that's some of the results I got. Also, sometimes I like to compare, so I just two photos which I took with the same camera, but using the Summarit-M 50mm lens, f2.5, the Leica lens, which is usually my go-to lenses, the series, the 35, 50, 75, and 90. I really like those lenses. Slightly different characteristics optically, as we can see, quite precise. I like the more modern bokeh, more modern rendering. On the left, it's one of the beaches inside the city, so you can walk from the port of Marseille. It takes you maybe 10 minutes to get there. And on the right, it's one of the bars, and this is in the bar is the 13 Corners bar, Bar des 13 Coins, in the neighborhood of Le Panier, which means basket. Sorry, I said it was a French accent. Basket. Very nice bars around, very nice restaurants. Very cool city. Again, walking around those two photos, on the left, it's a detail of a fence, obviously, which I found interesting. Here it's the Voigtlander lens with this non-full frame sensor. Basically, I think it's a 1.33. You divide it by 133 for size, but the geometry of this lens looks quite good. And on the right, I was at the museum, the Zand.photography de Marseille, Center for Photography in Marseille. And I think that's a work of Thomas Mayander, named Lumière Passion, Passion for Light, and where he chemically printed photos on the walls using various techniques. Very interesting place to go if you visit Marseille. Again, trying to get more into the details of my Voigtlander lens, but also discovering and feeling the city a bit more. Walking around the port of Marseille, those are the streets near the immigration zones, so lots of spaces are restricted in order to manage the influx of people and the outflux. Again, details on the left of that port. And on the right, the bay of Marseille, the main port for sailboats, and again, same detail. Here, the two photos were definitely going somewhere else. That's actually in Wetzlar in Germany, not far from Frankfurt. It's the Leica factory, basically. That's Wetzlar is the city where historically Leica was. The Light Park includes a museum, the Ernst Leitz Museum, where you can find some incredible cameras, and one Leica store, and also some small cafes and a restaurant and a hotel. And I was there with a group from Leica Switzerland for the Lights Photographica auction, where lots of equipment, Leica mainly, old equipment or really collector equipment was sold. And that was the occasion for the sale of a Leica Zero series, the first series of 35mm cameras made by Oscar Barnack, who's the inventor of the 35mm camera. And that was the sale of his camera, one from the 22 test cameras he made to see if the market was open to it. That was the one he used until 1930, basically. And the auction was really interesting, and the camera was sold for 14.4 million euros. Kind of surrealistic, but it was interesting. The place by itself, architecturally speaking, is quite interesting, quite photogenic. When they built it, they tried to bring elements of the photography equipment culture. So basically, as you can see on the right, the bottom windows are the format of diapositive, and on the top floor, the first floor, it's basically, I believe, the holes from cinema films. So lots of details correspond to cameras and optical equipment Leica makes. So it's a really interesting place. Here we switch back. This month is going to be a little bit random in terms of chronology and geography. So here I sometimes look at my pictures and edit them afterwards or go back to them. And those two pictures are my travel back from Marseille going north. So it's early morning in Marseille, and here I'm using the Leica M8 with a Summarit-M f2.5 lens. This is on the right, the high-speed train. Another kind of interior design. Great way to practice your lenses, obviously. I forgot to mention, but the photos from Wetzlar, they were all done with my Leica SL2 using Summarit-M lenses, and basically the 75mm f2.5. But I'll go back to it. Here we go back to Marseille, early morning, probably 6 a.m. Leica M8 with its CCD and a Summarit-M f2.5 lens. Here we're going back to Wetzlar, basically the travel back from Frankfurt going to Switzerland, using the SL2 and the Summarit-M 75mm lens with its really interesting rendering. 2 details of the airport while waiting for our plane. Here we're in Wetzlar, and then basically you have an old town, and the Lights Park, the Leica factory, is slightly outside. It's basically a 15-20 minutes walk, and in between you have a few industrial companies installed, and fields and nature. It's really nice. So street photography in the countryside, and here we definitely have a good idea of the rendering of the Summarit-M 75mm f2.5. Here 2 photos taken with SL2, Summarit-M 75mm. Those 2 photos, if you like those kinds of photos, I do like those. It just reminds me that when you travel, it's always nice to check on what time of the day you're going to travel, what kind of vehicle you're using. If it's a plane, it could be interesting to catch a sunset or a sunrise. So when you take your tickets, maybe you want to choose your seat, being on the good side of the plane to catch either the sunrise, the sunset, or different places, the mountains. On the right picture, you have the Jura Mountains. That's, I believe, descending on Geneva, west of Switzerland. Here we're switching back to Wetzlar. As I told you before, it's going back and forth, but we went with this Swiss team from Leica, which is composed of a group both from Zurich and both from Geneva, so German-speaking, French-speaking, super group. It's a super team too, very friendly, had lots of fun, and that's coming back from dinner and drinks, so it's a bit late, but there's no bad occasion to go do some street photography, so we tried, a small group, we tried to go and get a feel of the lights and the constructions. Again, same thing, the same, walking back to our hotel, which was in Lights Park, trying to discover places and ambiances, and yeah. So that's also a good way trying to push your equipment. This is basically almost nighttime. Basically nighttime. We still see a slight pinkish hue back at the horizon, but it's a great way to test your equipment and see how it reacts under different lighting conditions. Here we switch to totally something else. It's, in terms of equipment first, that's the Leica M M240 and a Summarit-M 35mm f2.5 lens, and that's in a shipyard west of Switzerland, near the Lake Léman coast. Some details of that shipyard. Switching completely elsewhere, that's Northern California, using an SL2 Leica and the 75mm Summarit-M again on the left. Here you really see it's nighttime, it's inside a car, you have the dashboard, you have a gate. You definitely see the limits of light sensitivity, both with this lens, which is not the brightest lens, and the sensor, which is fantastic, but has to really fight a very low light situation. And I'm handheld, so I'm not doing long exposures. On the right, however, that's an old lens. It's probably a Summarit-M Sumitar 28mm f5.6. Doing a long exposure, I was trying weird stuff, and you have a hill in the back. I was trying to get some ambiance, and that's one of the photos I kind of liked that came out of this experimental series. For those who followed my other videos or my work, I'm doing a work on the Silicon Valley, on California, on LA, San Francisco, and documenting different places. So that's part of it. SL2 Summarit-M lenses, which have characteristics. I also work with S systems, Leica medium format, which also has Summarit-M lenses and gives me a more homogeneous result. I can kind of better mix those pictures from those two formats by using those lenses, and I really like them also. That's a point. So that's in Menlo Park in the Silicon Valley. Those two photos, same equipment. It's in Morgan Hill, south of the Bay of San Francisco. Again, inside details from a diner, south of the Bay of San Francisco. Same thing. Again, that's the Stanford campus. So it's basically actual. It's some homeless at camps on the Stanford campus. And when I take pictures, I like portraits. I like human beings. But this thematic, to me, I think is better worked on by simply lacking the direct individuality. That's part of my work. I really like other approaches too. As a photo enthusiast, but my work is going to focus more on the emptiness and the void, trying to relay this helplessness of those sad situations. But yeah, so two pictures I took during my last trip in the Silicon Valley. Again, those are the marshlands in East Palo Alto. Basically, for decades there were landfills. Nobody cared about those marshlands, so they filled them with trash. That's where they threw trash. And recently, maybe two decades ago, they started really transforming them into protected places where people could enjoy actually nature, renewed nature. So they were cleaned up and yeah, that gives you an ambiance of the place. And basically what the buildings you see behind that's Palo Alto. That's basically the center of the Silicon Valley. And behind you have the mountains that separate the Bay Area from the ocean. Both photos actually head west. Again, those marshlands, how they transformed recently, and quite enjoyable. Again, between those marshlands and the more industrial part of the bay, there used to be industrial neighborhoods, and so East Palo Alto was quite poor. But that's where you would find the mechanics, you would find the handy workforce. But that's also gentrifying now. But you still have a few of those factories or buildings that were serving for those activities, which are still there and give a really interesting ambiance. Here we're again for the same work I'm doing on California. That's Palo Alto. On the left, it's a historical cinema from the 1920s on University Avenue, and back streets of Palo Alto on the right. Again, random captures of my last trip that I might use or not, but which I think are interesting in terms of colors and composition. Nothing exceptional, but yeah. Again, when you travel like this and when you try to document or build a project, I tend to go where I wouldn't naturally go. So on the left, for example, I went into a hotel that's being rebuilt, which is the Hotel President in Palo Alto, which was basically luxury condos for a while, but they're retransforming it to its original form, which was a hotel. So I just got in, I saw that something was going on. Again, the photo, I'm probably never going to use this photo for anything interesting, but I thought those two photos kind of reflected the way I work. If I'm curious about something, I will go there and I will try to take a photo, maybe only one. In that case, on the left picture, I asked the guy if it was okay if I could take a picture. He said, oh yeah, take pictures. I don't think he would have said no, but it gave me also a link to someone inside. And if I had found a place more interesting, maybe I would have asked him to go further in with him, with his helper. It's always interesting to actively seek your pictures. And on the right, that's basically El Camino Real, the main street going from north to south or south to north, crossing the Silicon Valley, which is not a freeway. Yeah, and those are the two last photos from this series, and hopefully it was entertaining. If you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to post them below, and yeah, see you next month.